Keeping Up Appearances is one of Britain's best-loved sitcoms.
Tally-ho!
Over 5 series, more than 13 million of us tuned in to watch this masterclass in sitcom snobbery.
She wants to be considered the best.
You've got to admire that stiff upper lip.
Tonight, we'll peek behind the net curtains of 1990s suburbia in the company of the glorious Mrs. Bucket.
It's not Bucket, it's Bouquet.
Sorry, Bouquet herself.
The taxi drivers would say, "You're not going to tell me how to drive this, are you?"
Along with her fellow cast members.
Back in a moment.
Everybody just loved the anticipation of having to confront Hyacinth.
She was usually getting me away from her friends'
Crew.
It wouldn't be a good idea to drive a car that speed at any actor.
And celebrity fans.
Zero self-awareness, zero empathy. Oh, it must be great to be Hyacinth Bouquet.
I think we all envied her in a funny kind of way.
We'll revel in the funniest moments. The delightful characters.
You've woken the dog.
Morning, Monster.
Morning, Major.
And much-loved catchphrases.
The Bouquet residence, the lady of the house speaking. You could come over to one of my candlelight suppers.
We'll reveal never-before-seen photos. And get the inside track on what really went on once the director shouted cut.
Went down for dinner, opened the door, everybody was from top to toe in rubber.
So put on your finest frock. Bring out your best crockery as we celebrate the fantastic Keeping Up Appearances.
Oh, Richard, what are you doing? Your barbecue's out of control.
One day, when I was minding my own business, my agent called and said that she'd had a call from Mr. Harold Snowd, very experienced producer, director of comedy, and that he'd just read a script that'd been left on his desk and wondered if Patricia Routledge would consider doing situation comedy. Well, of course I would, if it was well written.
I could become the Barbara Cartland of the West Midlands social circuit scene.
I'm a massive fan of Patricia Routledge, I think, and what I love is that she is that the ultimate aspirational character.
Whether it's the way she says certain words,
Mr. and Mrs. Richard Bouquet.
whether it's the physical comedy, the scathing class comedy.
You can always tell breeding.
You have musical comedy. All of the different aspects of making people laugh exist within Keeping Up Appearances.
Keeping Up Appearances first requested the honour of our presence on the 29th of October 1990. Written, presumably on the finest stationery, by Roy Clark, the pen behind sitcom giants Last of the Summer Wine and Open All Hours. It introduced the world to television's most condescending social climber, Hyacinth Bouquet.
She's a monster, really.
There's one thing I can't stand, it's snobbery and one-uppishness. People who try to pretend they're superior. Makes it so much harder for those of us who really are.
Everything she does, she thinks she does it perfectly or better than everybody else.
Her standards are high, too high for most people.
Everybody loves it, because I suspect a lot of families have got one posh one, and they just want to take him down a peg or two.
Hyacinth was determined to haul herself and her long-suffering husband Richard up the social ladder.
Afternoon. 50p for the car park, please.
Oh, can't we park in that little space nearer the house?
Oh, that's reserved for the family, madam.
I'm not saying I am family, but I have written to her ladyship from time to time for charitable purposes.
But she always fell back down again, thanks to her embarrassing lower-class family.
Hyacinth was a snob and wanted to impress all the local people about how grand she was, and we always let her down.
The purpose of the roles of Daisy and Onslow was to contrast with Hyacinth. The fact that they didn't want to better themselves at all.
So once they appear, you go, oh, we see who she really is. And that's where the humour then kicks in.
You know, she just wants to keep them very, very secretive because they're a total embarrassment to her.
Daisy, Onslow, what a surprise. How nice of you to call on the way to town. Let me walk you to the car.
You know, she just has to somehow get by with all the disadvantages and awful disappointments that life throws at her, not least the other part of her family.
No matter what knocked Hyacinth down, over 44 episodes, including 4 Christmas specials, she always picked herself up, dusted herself off, and put on her poshest outfit to start again.
She's absolutely fine. Whatever happens to her, she's fine. She will bounce back.
I don't think she realises that people are frightened of her or try to evade her. She's certainly got the hide of a rhino.
She was somebody to be avoided at all costs.
The queen of self-delusion, Hyacinth believed she was a much-loved pillar of the community. The comic reality, of course, was somewhat different.
Have you seen her go? It's worse than that. Hyacinth! Hyacinth!
Everybody would just flee and run into every door of Vex. So by the time she walked into the room, there was not a soul to be seen.
You know, I would. If she was down my street, I'd be checking my windows before I left the house.
Nobody ever wanted to actually get into any sort of discussion with Hyacinth.
And it's not hard to see why.
Oh, you do your letters like that, do you? Sort of lumpy and carefree.
Those poor women having to go, there's nothing we can do. There's absolutely nothing we can do. We have to just stand here and take it.
Oh, is that one of Mrs. Watson's cakes? Oh, yes, I can see it is now. She does try, bless her.
That poor woman who's made this cake, she's so proud of it.
That's one of Sheridan's favourite cakes, when it's made properly.
When it's made properly.
Garlic. Do you think that's quite appropriate in an Anglican church hall?
She's such a cowbag, isn't she?
The frustration of all these women who are desperate to say something to them but can't. They just want to go, oh, piss off, Hyacinth bucket, and they can't do it.
Inevitably, Hyacinth always got cut down to size, often by the arrival of a family member, dialing the embarrassment level up to 11.
All the ladies are singing, and then Daisy comes along on the bike with the fishnets. I mean, how horrendous is that for Hyacinth? The whole point about this is that Hyacinth does get her comeuppance. Because if you don't have that, you wouldn't like her. She'd be insufferable.
What on earth's that?
I've no idea. I've never seen her before in my life. We all know that pretending to be something better, higher grade than you are, and quite often slipping on the banana skin makes for good comedy if it's well written.
Coming up, we spill some behind-the-scenes secrets.
The teapot was never supposed to be dumped on the vicar.
And find out how the perfect match of Patricia and Hyacinth was made.
If the writer hadn't been writing this for me, he should have been.
The year was 1990. Nelson Mandela was released from prison, Margaret Thatcher was about to fall from power, and supermodels wouldn't get out of bed.
People do assume that I must have written Keeping Up Appearances for Patricia Routledge, but I didn't. The placing of Patricia into Keeping Up Appearances was entirely down to Harold Snowd, who produced it, and pulled off that perfect bit of casting.
I wanted the character of Hyacinth to be a sort of stately galleon. I didn't want somebody lightweight, either in, well, to be honest, size or vocal terms.
We're just off to my sister Violet's. You know, the one with the Mercedes, the sauna and room for a pony.
At the time, Patricia Routledge was best known as a theatre actress, but she was no stranger to television. From cafe owner Sylvia Snape in Coronation Street in 1961 to her BAFTA-nominated performances in Alan Bennett's Talking Heads. And for comedy fans, she'd been a smash hit as Kitty on Victoria Wood as Seen on TV.
Good evening.
Patricia's performance as Kitty demonstrated her perfect comic timing, along with her ability to portray disapproval and haughtiness on an epic scale.
Fortunately, I've just had my TV mended. Well, I say mended. A shifty-looking youth in plimsolls came and waggled me aerial and wolfed me gypsy creams, but that's the comprehensive system for you.
She was a character not a million miles from a certain other suburban housewife.
I suppose Kitty and Hyacinth share characteristics in common.
I think it was that condescension, that pretension, and the fact that it's done with that kind of rather savage humour. I think all those elements, you know, were Hyacinth Bouquet in a nutshell.
When the pilot script for Keeping Up Appearances landed on Patricia's doorstep, she realised straight away it was something special.
The character was so clear on the page that it arrested me straight away. And I knew her. I knew many of her. And I rang my agent in the morning and said, if the writer hadn't been writing this for me, he should have been.
Patricia Routledge can bring to Hyacinth what I think other actors possibly might not be able to. Her ability for comic timing, her physical comedy, the way she handles herself as Hyacinth Bouquet, the way she'll wear the hat, the way she'll hold her purse.
Oh, Mrs. Drummond, I'm Hyacinth Bouquet.
Excellent. Well, you can take the dogs for a walk, will you?
Dogs? Oh.
Along with the fact that her delivery was just spot on. Honestly, you just couldn't ask for anyone better.
But I love dogs.
Harold Snowd had found his Hyacinth. To play her long-suffering husband, Richard, he turned to the classically trained actor, Clive Swift.
There was nothing really on the paper except his character name and a few lines. And he simply made bricks without straw and did what the audience were doing, responding.
Come along, Richard. We'll miss the tide.
He was showing their irritation, exasperation, and did so very amusingly.
Now, I'm warning you, Richard. I will not have you being unfaithful to my hats.
He is the perfect foil to her because Clive Swift's got one of those faces that's just slightly crumpled and broken, and you just instantly know what his marriage is like by looking at his face before he's spoken.
We all know the secret of marriage is give and take. Kindness, understanding, tolerance.
There's a kind of grumpy little kind of thing going on, which slightly softens her up a bit and makes her palatable, I think.
He brought everything to the role.
Please don't use language like that, Richard.
I never said a word.
I can hear you thinking, dear.
They're a really good match. It's that magic chemistry that kind of makes her sing, I think.
For the other supporting characters, Snowd chose actors he knew could deliver the goods.
He was looking for a cast that would work well together, that would bounce off with each other, and frankly, he would make these characters completely their own.
The supporting characters in Keeping Up Appearances are critical.
May I help you people?
They enable Hyacinth to have the lines, to have the moments.
They very much enjoyed their characters and bringing those characters to life. I think it would be fair to say they realised that the star as such was the Hyacinth Bouquet character, but they were very happy to have their own narrative in parallel.
Come in, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Hyacinth.
Wipe your feet, dear.
Josephine Tewson was cast as Hyacinth's terrified neighbour, Elizabeth.
I thought we'd have the nicer china.
Oh, thank you, Hyacinth.
There's something of a family heirloom.
Oh, God.
Of course, her calling card was her nervousness.
Biscuit?
Well, Thank you.
She was wonderful to work with and brought many ideas, you know, to our scenes.
She was not the timid, quiet little person that you saw as Liz. She was extremely funny and, if anything, had to suppress a lot of things to play Liz.
I don't think I've ever seen your sister Daisy's house, have I, Hyacinth? No. No, I don't believe you have.
Away from the cosy suburbs on the wrong side of the tracks lived Hyacinth's sister Daisy and her brother-in-law Onslow, whose slobbish lifestyle was a constant source of embarrassment.
We were all so naughty together.
Each of, particularly that household, represents something that Hyacinth hates and is scared of.
So once they appear, you go, oh, we see who she really is, and that's where the humour then kicks in.
Wonderful creations. And, I mean, Daisy, Judy Cornwall.
What happened to that terrible bird you used to knock about with?
I married you.
Just marvellous.
It was on the page, but I had to get that relationship with Geoffrey Hughes, and it was marvellous working with Geoffrey because he was absolutely brilliant.
It must be wonderful being married to a bum like your Onslow. So you can let yourself go completely. I wouldn't say completely.
Near enough completely.
When I read that pilot, I thought, oh no, this is going to work. And when I saw the people who were going to do it, I knew it would work because they were all brilliant people.
Onslow.
Hyacinth?
Onslow is the perfect foil to Hyacinth because if you got her to describe her worst nightmare in human male form, it would be Onslow. And he's in her family. I mean, it couldn't be worse.
But he's got to a stage in life where work is off the agenda, and so he's just going to watch the television and drink beer all day. And to Hyacinth, that's a problem. And it's especially a problem when Onslow leaves Onslow's house and comes anywhere near Waning Elm.
Isn't that our Rose?
Rosie was just naughty. She just loved men. And that was it. Woohoo, get your knickers off.
I think that's a nightmare for her to have to deal with because it's, again, all the things she hates. And it's her sister.
Her character was outrageous, wasn't it?
Now just keep walking, Rose, dear.
Rose was played by Shirley Stelfox in the first series, with Mary Miller stepping into the towering heels in Series 2.
And Mary came in, and again, what a great character. Very rounded, aren't they, those characters?
With the cast in place, filming began on the pilot episode. First, the outside scenes. And then back to London to perform in front of a live studio audience.
You do a run of your scenes to be recorded and including the filming. Then there'd be a break and then the audience would come in and away you go.
Of course, when we did the pilot, most of us had all done experience with studio audiences, but Pat hadn't. And bless her heart, she was a bit nervous.
Performing in front of a studio audience is quite terrifying.
And she watched all of us going ahead, and then I think she relaxed and saw it was no threat, and she was all right.
In her very first scene, Hyacinth had the audience in stitches thanks to the unusual pronunciation of her last name.
There's usually something for a Mrs. Richard Bouquet.
How do you spell bouquet?
B-U-C-K-E-T. B-U-C-K-E-T.
Oh, bucket.
I think the whole name thing is brilliant because we've all met people that you read their surname and you say, oh, that's a funny surname, and they're instantly, oh, no, it's actually this. Goodness gracious me, we use that as, the Kapoors and the Coopers. It's using a name change is the poshest thing that you can possibly do.
Bucket is such a guttural sound, isn't it? It's sort of a bucket of whelks, a bucket of manure, for want of a better expression, whereas bouquet is fragrant. Bouquet of flowers. It's far more in keeping with Hyacinth.
It wasn't just the studio audience who found Hyacinth and her family hilarious. BBC bosses took one look at the pilot and immediately asked for more.
The pilot was a great success, and so they wanted us for the first series.
Jeremy Gittins joined the cast as Hyacinth's new vicar.
I've had many a religious inspiration on that sofa. If your charming wife would like to sit here, where she'll be within easy reach of my tasty homemade canapes.
I think it was very good casting for that vicar to be handsome and dishy and, you know, because I think that would have made Hyacinth, you know, want to spend more time with him and to show off that she has got his ear a bit more than the other ladies.
It's very kind of you to invite us, Mrs. Bucket.
It's bouquet, Vicar.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I found the first scene with the vicar in it very funny. Initially, when I read it, I thought, this is a nice little scene.
Elizabeth, if you could pass round my Royal Doulton with the hand-painted periwinkles.
Look, I think it really would be better, Hyacinth, if we all helped ourselves.
Yes, we can do that. Yes, jolly good idea.
But it was enhanced by some of the additions by the actors during rehearsal. For example, the teapot was never supposed to be dumped on the vicar, you know, this boiling, scalding hot teapot on the person you're trying to impress, which got a belter of a laugh from the audience. It was great. The fact that she'd rather dump it on the vicar rather than ruin one of her tables by sticking it there was just ridiculous.
Word spread that a seat for the studio recording was the hottest ticket in town.
There'd been momentum in the studio of, like, people really want to come and see this. This is great. And then when it was in people's homes and people recognised the characters and recognised the artists, you thought, yes, this is quite special.
The success of the first series meant that Hyacinth's antics became appointment viewing, regularly pulling in 13 million viewers.
I don't know when the moment hit me that we were rather successful, but the taxi drivers quite often would say something like, "You're not going to tell me how to drive this, are you?"
Coming up, we find out what the cast got up to when the show hit the road.
Went down for dinner, opened the door, and everybody was from top to toe in rubber.
And Hyacinth gets taken for a wild ride. When Series 2 of Keeping Up Appearances launched in September 1991, the show was so popular that even the supporting cast members were being recognised on the street.
I remember cycling once, and this guy was cycling the opposite direction, turning left. And as he turned left, he just shouted, "Richard!"
In the battle for ratings dominance, the BBC had a shake-up and moved the sitcom to Sunday evenings. And on screen, Hyacinth got all shook up when Elizabeth's musician brother Emmett, played by David Griffin, moved in next door.
I think what he brought to it was an extra element for Elizabeth to play off of, because he wanted to get away from Hyacinth, but Elizabeth couldn't get away from Hyacinth.
Living next door to us, you'll soon learn that you're at the centre of the cultural hub of things round here.
With Emmett, she's got somebody that she can almost use him to raise her up.
Abiento, as the French say.
And I think there is that kind of thing about, if somebody can play an instrument or they're literary, you know, they've got a knowledge of something, it makes her look good, and she can sort of, you know, by association say, well, I must be very knowledgeable and well-educated and musically minded.
Ye gods. Is the woman always like that?
With Hyacinth, it's funny because she tries too hard.
Well, of course, it's keeping up with the Joneses, which is what my mum used to say, even to her garden.
Why my roses not as big as those next door?
She couldn't have just roses. She had to have the best roses.
I wanted the vicar to be greeted by a blaze of petal glory.
You know, we've got to keep in front of everybody else. Otherwise, they'll look down on us.
The harder she tries to climb that social ladder and mix with people that she isn't really au fait with, the easier it is that she's going to fall. And it's the manner that she falls that is always funny. Every episode, we know that something is going to happen, but it's how it happens and why it happens that is what makes it funny.
And it's the rise and fall of these social aspirations that are established from the very start of every episode in the title sequence.
I think the title sequence is perfect because what you have to set up with a sitcom like that is something that will take you into the storyline so that you'll watch, but you also then can confirm who that character is immediately.
So I set about trying to dream up little scenes. Some of them I took from the scripts, some I kind of invented myself. I went back to Harold with a storyboard and he liked the ideas.
What Harold Snow didn't tell Sid was that he'd already filmed his own version of the titles, but writer Roy Clark hadn't liked it.
I didn't know anything about that at all. Nobody mentioned it.
Sid had convinced Harold to go with his idea, but he now had to win over Patricia.
I had to explain to her that, in 30 seconds, with no voice, to try and get across her character, it had to be her expressions, and she did it beautifully.
Her preciseness with making sure the stamp is ruled off so it's in the right place. So I think it's a lovely setup so that people know what they're about to watch.
I don't know anybody who puts their milk bottles in the dishwasher,
Well, I think it represents everything the programme is. Flowers, beautiful, and then the caterpillar appears. Yes, everything is just ruined, no matter how hard she tries. It all goes wrong.
Often when Hyacinth's best-laid plans went awry, she ended up covered in mud, soaked to the skin, or falling into a bush.
One of the things that I think you don't get credit for, really, is the physical comedy that went on in the show. And there was a lot of it.
Falling over, being pushed over, has been at the heart of comedies, certainly of clowning, since the year dot. And particularly if it happens to a person who has a high regard of themselves. Then I suppose we feel a certain sort of unkind satisfaction. How are the mighty fallen?
Roy Clark, actually, very particularly in a lot of his sitcoms, gets his characters to do a lot of physical stuff because I think there is a nod to the silent movies. There is a nod to the characters that didn't speak, and physical comedy counts for a lot of his work. And so you need actors who can pull that off.
And Patricia is extraordinarily good at it. She's always, despite being a sturdy woman, she's very agile.
You're familiar with Clark?
Often Harold would construct some of that physical activity. It's also looking at the script and seeing something like climbing over a wall. Patricia couldn't do that. But if you shoot it in set shots where you're cutting away to, say, a reaction of somebody watching this, you can have her start to climb the wall. You can then reposition Patricia on top of the wall. You can then have her on the other side of the wall. So the effect is that she's climbed the wall.
Worked brilliantly. I generally can't remember whether it was all of her or any part of her.
There was a lot of physical comedy.
What can you see, Richard?
But because there was a logic about it, you just get on and do it.
All those wonderful scenes where she goes behind bushes or falls into the shrubbery. Wonderful slapstick.
I did all of my stunts except 2, and I leave it to you to decide which of those they were.
She is a great physical clown, there's no doubt about that.
Getting on a horse, that scene is hysterical. It doesn't matter how many times you've seen it. Absolutely hysterical.
Now, listen, horse. I'm not a person to be trifled with. Richard, come and help me up here.
Patricia was very, very game to be involved and do as much as she could do.
How does one start it?
High risk factor. You're one of your lead people on a live animal.
Perhaps you left the brake on, Harson.
In films, when they want to get a horse going, they slap it on the rump.
Well, try that, dear, but gently. Remember, I'm not Roy Rogers.
Pat doesn't ride, so we had Pat sitting on the camera dolly, which was on a length of track, and the camera low looking up, so we could only see the top half of Hyacinth, as if she was on the horse. And then in the scene, the horse bolts with her, jumps over a fence and goes cantering off, galloping off into the field.
And we shot away with her, looking as though she was definitely riding it. It's a lot of fun,
And it gets funnier and funnier, and it's all about physical comedy, slapstick comedy.
Many of the show's funniest bits of physical comedy took place away from the confines of the studio in a wide variety of outdoor locations, from cars and boats to stately or not so stately homes, all hand-picked by producer-director Harold Snowd.
Harold Snowd is a very accomplished and very experienced comedy director. Knew exactly what he wanted, thoroughly in charge. We sometimes disagreed with him, which made for an interesting explosion or two occasionally. That's good for us all.
With most of the location filming taking place in the West Midlands, the cast and crew lodged in hotels.
The main hotel we stayed in the main high street in Leamington Spa was a beautiful, beautiful hotel. And they were absolutely brilliant with us. They were so nice, so helpful. And they even had a menu in the dining room, which was a Keeping Up Appearance special menu with dishes named after all the characters. Some rather lovely dishes for Rose, risotto, Hyacinth, something a la creme. And unfortunately, there's a Vicar hot pot.
However, in a different hotel on location, there was something else altogether on the menu.
Around 5, 6 o'clock, I'm watching television, and I kept on hearing this sort of squeaky noise go past my bedroom door. This happened 3 or 4 times, and I thought, that's not a squeak, it was more of a squelch, like a... Thought, very strange. What on earth is that? Anyway, went down for dinner, opened the door, and everybody was from top to toe in rubber, squelching away, drinking Chardonnay and gin and tonics, eating peanuts, chatting away like it was a normal Saturday night.
And it was another encounter with the public that proved memorable for actor David Jansen, who, whilst waiting for his cue from the director, got a tap on his shoulder.
She said, could you take this for me? Save it, take me putting it through the postbox. And at that point, Harold shouted out, action, so I had to start walking down the road. I had my letters that I had to deliver one to Hyacinth, and then it was a genuine letter from somebody. And I hope it wasn't that important, because I had to wait to the end of filming before I could actually put it in the postbox myself.
Listen to that! He played beautifully.
Yes, he does.
Brahms, I think.
Mendelssohn, surely.
Just testing.
Hyacinth's bungalow was in an area called Binley Woods, which is east of Coventry. And we did no interiors of the bungalow, but we certainly dressed it outside with various things to make it user-friendly. And we used next door's exterior for Elizabeth and Emmett's.
Hyacinth would have liked that area, but I'm sure she would have liked an even grander area if she could have had it her own way.
I do love Mendelssohn. It's Chopin, I think. Oh, yes, of course, Chopin.
Daisy and Onslow's house was in an area called Stoke Aldermore, which is a district of Coventry.
How can a place look like this 50 years after the Blitz?
There was a door that we would bring and replace their front door with that had a cracked glass. That door would be taken back to the studio to become the inside of the door for the studio. There's an old wrecked car that we'd park in the garden. We take their fence down and put a broken gate up. So really the design department did a lot of dressing down to make Onslow's house look a lot more shabby than it was in real life.
It was a cul-de-sac, and we'd shut it off, and people would, politely gather and watch.
I think they were all very happy to have us come into the community, and they liked watching it from behind the windows and things, and all our battered car and the dog going mad and all the rest of it.
Those interested onlookers also got to see a few hilarious, unscripted moments too.
There was a scene outside Daisy on Onslow's, and the artist had to drive a car up, rush out of the car, run into Daisy and Onslow's. The artist pulled the car up, rushed out, completely forgot the car engine was running, no brake, just continuing in the moment of acting.
Luckily for us, this entertaining blooper was kept, and we can enjoy Clive Swift and Geoffrey Hughes desperately trying to stay in character and keep their composure. What professionals.
I'm sorry, I did try and keep a straight face.
And we all looked as this car just drifted down to the end of the road, which fortunately we did have control of at the end of the road. I thought, OK then.
Coming up, it's all hands on deck on the QE2.
We were well over-subscribed.
As Hyacinth rocks the boat.
Pat really came into her own with the dancing.
The bouquet residence.
The bouquet residence?
The bouquet residence?
Lady of the house.
Speaking.
The bouquet residence.
Hyacinth Bouquet's memorable catchphrase made her a household name, and not just in Britain.
I've heard this rumour that Pope Benedict XVI actually has this is the bouquet residence.
That's amazing, isn't it? I'd love to have heard it. But they kept that one quiet.
And if the rumours are true, His Holiness wasn't the only high-profile fan.
We were one of the Queen Mother's favourite sitcoms, which was lovely to know. And the Queen enjoyed it too.
Hyacinth would have been delighted to hear that the Queen Mother was a fan of her life. There would have been a party given in the honour. The entire street would have known about it.
Oh, immensely. Hyacinth would have been flattered beyond words. And why not?
The closest Hyacinth actually got to the royal family was a mutual love of a tip-top titfer.
Her actual hats were made by the Queen Mother's actual milliner.
Well, the Queen Mother knew that we copied a couple of her hats. I know that she knew that and was quite amused by it.
Do you think this is a suitable hat for an art exhibition, dear?
Hyacinth's outfit, always beautiful. The hats, the dresses, the suits, always perfect. I look at them and think, yes, the tailored suits, there's a hat for weddings, perfect.
Well, when you are creating a character, wardrobe's very important. What you wear says a great deal about you. And we found a dress. It was very soft and feminine. And then we had it repeated with different materials.
She always wanted to look just so. And of course, it always went wrong and she got soaked or filthy. It just added to the part and the performance.
Hyacinth always had the perfect outfit for every occasion on her social calendar.
Take a nice one, Richard. Christmas card this year.
The yachting scene with her dressed up to the nines, and Richard as well, and her pretending that she knows everything about it.
Use the brake, Richard!
There doesn't seem to be one.
Of course there's a brake! How do you think they used to stop the Queen Mary?
Richard was a human bridge in that episode with his feet on the yacht and hanging on to the bank for dear life.
Hold the boat with your feet. Pull with both hands.
Where Hyacinth steps onto the bridge, which is the body, that was actually my body. I mean, you couldn't ask Richard to do that. But she was very hesitant to put any weight on my back.
I mean, who wouldn't be nervous about stepping on somebody's neck?
She didn't realise that I had put a piece of wood underneath, which was hidden between the bank and the boat. So, she wasn't going to do me too much damage. And she stepped very, very quickly. Didn't hurt a bit.
Now then, Richard. Richard?
Throw me a rope!
There is a bit in it where the boat has got hyacinths in it and it's drifting backwards. And Richard grabs hold of the rope and he tries to pull the boat back to the bank. And there he is at the stern of the boat, hanging on. Of course, the propeller was going round, so it is fairly dangerous. You've got to make sure your feet don't get anywhere near that propeller. And, of course, it does take a little time to do a sequence like that, so you're in the water for a long time. But you could not tell that that was not Richard.
Now, just look at your jersey.
I do feel sorry for Richard, because it seems like a terrible life being bullied, dominated.
He's resigned himself to, okay, I know what she's going to be like. I may as well just go with it, because there's no escape. She will hunt me down.
He's so downtrodden, but nobody meets her standards. Everything, come along, dear. Even when he's driving the car, you know, she's having to tell him, watch the curve, dear. Watch that person. She's looking ahead. Be careful, dear.
Mind that herd of cows, dear.
It's in a field.
They may be due for milking.
Minding the cow.
We used to discuss, Clive and I, what his background was, because there was no evidence in the writing. And we decided that he'd been an orphan. You never hear of his family, and that he loved being looked after well.
Other than a bit of gardening, we never see Richard do any housework whatsoever.
He doesn't have to do anything. She's in charge. And he maybe has quite a nice life, if that's the life he wants.
After drying out, Richard was dragged into another watery escapade when Hyacinth hosted a supper with riparian entertainments. That's a riverside picnic to the rest of us.
I just remember that the filming on the river was really quite difficult, mainly because it was a very, very hot day.
Evening, Vicar. Hello, Onslow. Sorry we can't stop.
So just looking like you were far more professional and adept than you really were was pretty hard.
You know, when you watch the boat race, they seem to go quite fast.
There are 8 of them.
Oh, yes, I suppose that must make a difference.
Filming on the river with Richard and Hyacinth in the rowing boat involved various setups. You would have shots taken from the bank.
We won't be long now.
We also had other boats that would travel with the rowing boats. And also we would tether the rowing boat to the larger boat and have the camera right down at rowing boat level. And for Richard's lines, Harold would read in Patricia's lines. And filming on water always takes longer. Water doesn't keep still, it keeps moving.
It's fun, isn't it, Richard?
The actors themselves did most of the rowing, and they looked brilliant doing it.
They may have been substituted with a stuntman for one shot.
You couldn't risk an actor getting hit by a piece of washing machine or something that had been dug out of the Thames.
Thank you, Lord.
When she gets her comeuppance, it's a great fun to us. I think even a vicar, as good a man as he was, would get enjoyment from that. Only from Hyacinth.
Despite the difficulties of filming on water, Harold Snow decided that for the 1993 Christmas special, he would take it to the next level, with an entire episode on board that most glamorous of luxury liners, the QE2.
I remember filming on the QE2 almost every second of it. It was hugely enjoyable.
And this is 1993. It was, the Queen Elizabeth II, and it was well before the time when there are so many cruise ships out there now. It was an iconic, beautiful ship.
Are you sure this is the right way?
Have faith, Richard.
After several hilarious mishaps, Hyacinth and Richard finally made it to the port to be waved off, only to find that this ship had sailed.
Cunard even docked the QE2, the correct way round that Harold wanted. It suited his idea of the shots and things he wanted, which was amazing.
No, madam, I'm afraid we cannot go back for you.
Well, you could have waited.
All I can suggest is you try and catch us up.
Now listen to me, my good man. Important as I am in local circles, I have not yet risen to the level where I can walk on water.
Hyacinth eventually made it on board.
It was her ultimate sort of cruise holiday, and therefore, of course, all the more peeved she was when Onslow and Daisy turned up.
She was furious with her sister being there, and she thought we were stowaways and we'd just climbed out of the lifeboat. But we weren't. It was a prize. Onslow had won.
There are multiple costume changes in that episode. Most of them are over the top, but very of a nature of a QE2 cruise in the 90s, with the exception of Hyacinth's disguise, in order to find her sister and brother-in-law.
Desperate to find Daisy and Onslow before they ran into trouble, they searched the ship, disturbing everybody on board, including a brush with real aristocracy.
We got on board and we realised that Lord Patrick Litchfield was on board. He was a guest lecturer on photography. And Harold thought, marvellous. I think I'll just ask him if he'd like to be involved. And he joined Harold and Patricia and Clive for dinner. And it was very, very lovely.
Are you sure you're in this dining room, madam? This is reserved for first-class passengers.
Look, there are some places at the captain's table.
Those are reserved for the captain's guests, madam. Ah, here they come now.
A letter was placed in every cabin to the effect that we were filming, and if anyone wished to don evening dress at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, would they please give their names?
Harold and I thought, well, if we get 30 people, we'll work with that. And we had 150 people turn up in beautiful cocktail dresses.
We were well oversubscribed. It was wonderful. So they were the passengers were part of the final scene.
Onslow, congratulations.
It was magnificent. It was Hyacinth, for once, having to back down and, acknowledge that Onslow had won this one.
This person chap came up to the cabin and said we're on the captain's table. And I thought, blimey, I mean, you win a competition, you get a luxury cruise, and then they expect you to eat with the crew.
But I don't see why we should be mixing with the staff. I think that's just priceless.
The dancing thing at the end, Pat really came into her own with the dancing, and she summed up the courage to do it.
It was also a rare moment of Hyacinth letting go.
I just knew how she'd behave. It's a lot of instinct, I think, comes into the playing of comedy. In other words, you don't have to think about it. If a character takes over, they take over.
As Hyacinth relaxes into it, as she does with everything, goes completely overboard, and it's this very jazz handsy routine.
And Geoffrey looked shocked out of his mind. Clive was all right because he was dancing sedately with me.
It's almost a shame the credits are rolling over the top of it because we just want to see it.
Coming up, how Hyacinth hit those comedy high notes.
I think you've got to be able to sing in tune in order to sing out of tune.
It's Sheridan!
And why we never hear or see her beloved son.
Oh, Sheridan, Sheridan.
Patricia Routledge's performance as Hyacinth Bouquet won her many plaudits, including 2 BAFTA nominations and an OBE.
Someday you'll give me the pleasure of entertaining you at one of my candlelight slippers.
Oh, what an actress. She is amazing. She plays her perfectly.
You have to have a funny bone to be able to do comedy. You can't teach it to people, but you can learn it by being around people who are very good at it. And I think Patricia Routledge had every bone in her body must have been a funny bone because she understood it beautifully.
I do hope you'll all join me in a bottle of the Dowager Lady Ursula's Haymow Geeseberry Wood. Comedy has been really part of my breathing from the word go. My family had a sense of humour. My father could tell a good story, and listening as quite a small child to the grown-ups, I suppose I became aware of the rhythm of good comedy writing and delivery.
I loved working with Patricia. I have to say I was very much in awe of her. She was such a great actress, and I liked watching her rehearse. I mean, she didn't play that part so beautifully by accident. She worked hard, and if something wasn't just so, she did it again and again and again until she got it exactly how it should be.
The cast worked hard to ensure the show was a smash hit, but they also found time to play.
Before every single new series, we would meet up, have a lovely lunch, stuff our faces, and catch up with news about each other, and then gossip.
We got on great. It's a very happy company, without a doubt.
One of the fun things was waiting for the new script to arrive and to see what was actually involved in the episode.
Once Roy Clark delivered the script, unusually, he had no further involvement in the production.
He produced the goods and stayed in Yorkshire, I think, where he lives, which was a pity, really.
I didn't see him very often. No. But he was a brilliant writer. I mean, the writing was wonderful.
When I submit a script, I've got no interest in producing it, directing it, and I leave it to people.
He wrote, please respect the writing. Harold was a producer-director. That is what he did.
There wasn't an awful lot there on the page to help you understand, how you would react, what you would do, but he knew that the cast that he had would react very well to all of those things that were written.
And what was lovely was the freedom to add little bits that we had. And usually you find if there's good writers, they let you add things.
Obviously, a lot of the success of the series was down to the characterization and the relationships between those characters. And Roy Clark is absolutely brilliant at creating characters, first class.
I'd like to have met him. I wrote to him once, just thanking him, because, he did me a favour writing such a nice character for myself. But no, he never made it down, which was, it's one of those things. I'm sure a very busy man. I'd like to have met him, shaken him by the hand.
Quick, they're getting in the car! Every character Roy ever wrote was very rounded. He makes you want to know their life, and he gives you the whole story back. And that's what makes a rounded character.
One character in particular became a viewer favourite without ever being seen on screen.
Oh, Sheridan!
Oh, Sheridan.
Patricia always said, over my dead body will we see Sheridan. When she agreed to do Keeping Up Appearances, she said, he's got to be imagined. He's got to be in people's imagination.
He could literally do anything and she would not be able to see it. Her son is perfect and fault-free.
She took it for granted that he adored her, which is why he rang up every so often. But of course, he rang up to ask for money.
Absolutely nothing over £10.
But Hyacinth, being so self-absorbed, just presumed that he adored his mother.
I'm not convinced that actually Sheridan does enjoy time with his mother as much as his mother does. I think he might be slightly desperate to get away and live his life with Tarquin.
It's Sheridan!
What does he want?
I don't know that he wants anything, dear. It's just a personal, thoughtful little call to his mummy.
Well, everyone has their own idea of what Sheridan is like, and we should leave it at that.
Sheridan is not the only example of leaving the comedy up to our imaginations.
We never see one of Hyacinth's candlelight suppers. We see the setup, we see guests just beginning to arrive for pre-dinner drinks, but we never see it. And that almost makes it funnier because we have in our heads a picture of what is going on.
Everybody can imagine what those candlelit suppers are like, and would you like to be a guest?
I don't think so. I'd be frightened to pick up the knife and fork.
I mean, the candlelit suppers, you can just imagine. You don't need to see it. You know exactly what it's going to be like. Horrendous.
As with all successful sitcoms, part of the enjoyment are the catchphrases and running gags.
It's my sister, Daisy. She's not the one with the swimming pool or the Mercedes. And there's certainly no room for a pony.
This was something that writer Roy Clark liked to play with. Whether it's Daisy's dog, shoe inspections, Hyacinth's backseat driving,
Go straight on.
or just plain avoidance. Nothing got more laughs, though, than nervous neighbour Elizabeth.
Just her absolute stress levels going from 0 to 100, knowing that she's got to hold this teacup and it's proper china and it's hyacinths. I mean, as an audience, you're just waiting for her to drop it.
The Royal Doulton with the hand-painted periwinkles. The teacups and the tea set that we see Hyacinth serve her tea to people like Elizabeth or Councillor Mrs. Nugent.
The crockery, the Royal Doulton crockery, with the periwinkle design. It's inevitable, as soon as you see the crockery, that it's going to be smashed. The Royal Doulton is always in jeopardy.
This isn't actually Royal Doulton. Hate to break it to everybody. This is Coldclough Braganza, and the prop department just went down to the local market to see what was available. It looks smart to your average person, but actually it's nowhere near the standards of Royal Doulton.
Jo had the same gag so many times at the dropping of the teacup, but she always nailed it, always got it exactly right. Even though we'd seen it before, we knew what was going to happen, she made it funny, and what's more, she made it believable.
And you just think, wow, you know, to come up with that many ways of having a little shake. And my favourite one is when she's like, oh, I'm OK, this is fine. And then Hyacinth walks in behind her and it flies out of hand. And Patricia Routledge dives across the sofa to make sure she catches it, and she does.
Elizabeth's brother Emmett also came in for his fair share of torment from Hyacinth.
Hyacinth singing with Emmett was one of my favourites, where he's playing the piano because he's a good musician. She's an awful singer as Hyacinth Bouquet.
Now, più piano, pianissimo.
It's hilarious. And she's always singing at people because she thinks her voice is wonderful.
I enjoyed it very much. And I think you've got to be able to sing in tune and sing well in order to sing out of tune.
Hyacinth's tuneless wailing disguises the fact that Patricia Routledge is a classically trained singer.
She could have had a concert career, really. It was that good a voice, that special a voice.
In fact, before Hyacinth catapulted her to worldwide fame, Patricia was a musical theatre star.
She was one of the first Brits on Broadway. And her biggest single success, probably personal success, was in a show called Darling of the Day. It needed a really fiery British actress with a great sense of comedy, but also some gravity as well. And several of the songs in the score were actually written for her.
For which I was given a nice prize, the Tony. It amused me very much. Of course, they wanted more of it, and I didn't. A little of that goes a long way, I think, particularly if you love music as much as I do.
Coming up, why Patricia said goodbye to Hyacinth.
There were other adventures to have.
And fans around the world still fall for the show.
I think every country has women like that who want to be social climbers.
We must never move, dear. We'd be greatly missed.
In 1995, after 5 hugely successful series, Hyacinth Bouquet hung up her slimline white telephone for the last time.
I decided to leave Keeping Up Appearances because there were other adventures to have.
I think Pat was getting more interested in doing other things.
She'd got plenty of more projects in mind, and if that's what she felt, I don't blame her one iota. The only power we really have as actors is to say no.
I am immensely appreciative of what it's brought me. I don't take that for granted, but I needed to move on. It's much better to hear people say, "Oh, aren't you doing any more of those?" than to hear them say, "Oh, is that still on?"
I think possibly that was the right decision at the time. 6 years is a good stretch, and I think it was good to bow out on a high. We bowed out, I believe it was actually on Christmas Day in 1995 with a huge audience figure, and that seemed a fitting finish to the series.
Nearly 17 million of us watched as Hyacinth was carried out on a stretcher, uttering those immortal final words.
Tell God it's Bouquet!
Placing it in the top 10 most viewed programmes of 1995. But while the series might have finished, this was far from the end of the story for Keeping Up Appearances. In 2016, the BBC asked Roy Clark to return to the character of Hyacinth once more, but this time to show her as a young woman in a prequel.
Hyacinth? Yes, Mum?
I think it's really clever showing how the Hyacinth Bouquet we know came to be that person. And I think Kerry Howard, who plays her, did that really, really well.
The Cooper Smith residence, the maid speaking?
Listen, you can't fill Patricia's shoes at all. And you wouldn't even try. You do your own interpretation, and that's what she did. And she did it brilliantly.
That same year, the BBC announced that Keeping Up Appearances had been sold 992 times to more than 45 countries, making it their most sold programme worldwide.
I think Keeping Up Appearances works anywhere in the world because I think every country has women like that who want to be social climbers.
I get letters from America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, all across Europe.
Americans absolutely love it. I think they think that was how England was at that time. This is how the British are.
I've been made a pastor of a couple of churches in America and invites to some of their dues. It's all very flattering, of course, so I think I've got quite a ecclesiastic fan base.
It's found a new audience now, 30-plus years later.
But for Patricia Routledge, now Dame Patricia, her most famous role is just one chapter in her long career. Since Keeping Up Appearances, she starred in 4 series of Hetty Wainthropp Investigates and trod the boards in The Importance of Being Earnest.
I loved playing Lady Bracknell. We had a great success with it. The Queen Mother came on her 99th birthday and brought her girls with her. That was a memorable night.
Now in her 90s, she's still charming audiences in a long-running stage show with music journalist Edward Seckerson.
It plays almost like a play, and you get to know her timing, and you get to be in awe of her timing and the way she'll hold an audience in the palm of her hand until finally she'll nail them with the joke. Now, you won the coveted Tony Award for your performance
that
in
was
Darling of the
nice.
Day. In fact, Groucho Marx presented it to you.
Yes, he never stopped talking. I had difficulty getting my speedy thank you in.
Isn't that amazing?
There are people who can't really get beyond keeping up appearances if they think about me, but it did make a great difference. And I do get the most wonderful letters, and I'm very grateful for that because you realise how important it is to have made people happy.
When people are down, they want something to make them laugh, you know?
It's just the magic ingredients of a television show all coming together at the right time.
A few years back, I fractured my hand and I ended up in A&E, and I could hear all this laughter going on around me, and I thought, why are people laughing in A&E? You know, that's not something you hear. And suddenly I saw the monitors, and there she was.
I remember a wonderful letter some years ago from a little lady, and she'd felt that the world had really come to an end. And she made herself a cup of tea and sat down and put the television set on. And then she said, there you were. And it just helped me get through a very, very difficult time. Makes it all thoroughly worthwhile.
Is there anyone anywhere who can pass me a drink?
Raspy voice of the season, Noddy Holder is your guide to dodgy Christmas adverts and presenters in a festive flap when Christmas TV goes horribly wrong tomorrow at 10. Next tonight, Tom Cruise is mixing up a cocktail.